Hey, Frank Zalar here again. The next part. We talked about the cylinder heads, and we've also talked about crankshaft and bearings. The next thing is an extremely important part of the motor build, and that's your pistons, rods, and rings. There's a lot of people that say that long rods are better. And Smokey Yunick once said, put the longest damn rod you can put in the motor. There may be some professionals with certain kind of heads with certain length rods that can get more horsepower out of them. But what I've seen is that on a small block Chevrolet, going from a 5.7 rod to a 6-inch rod does little or nothing, except add weight to the rotating mass. When you get into a 6-inch rod on a 400, it actually gets up into the oil ring. And I've used 6-inch rods and 400s. And I didn't have any problems because they come with special oil rings that have little buttons on them to hold them in place. Another wives' tale that I want to separate from is that if you rings are lined up, you're not going to have any compression. That is true. Well, you'll lose some compression. But I've painted motors together that have had the rings separated and ran it and pulled it apart and had them in different places. And I don't care what anybody said because I've known it, because I've done it. The rings will turn on the piston. Should they? Probably not. Do they? Absolutely. Rings come in different sizes, and they come in different coatings. And a standard set of rings on most pistons are a 5/64 ring. They've been using those rings since the 60s. They're strong. They have a lot of pressure on them. That's why when you get an older motor, it's always got a big ridge on them. Now you take a newer LS1 motor or you take a new Hemi motor apart and you go, you know what, there's virtually no ridge in it. There's no ridge in it because it doesn't have these gigantic rings pushing up against the cylinder walls, chewing them up. You can take it apart with 100,000 miles and there's no ridge. They do it in new cars. So why wouldn't you do it in a performance car? When you go look at pistons and you look at it and you say, okay, I'm going to make a 10-to-1 motor, and I'm going to get a 4-valve relief piston, and they're cheap, and it's got 5/64 rings, and you're not even paying attention to it. Okay, this is where I'm going to want you to change the way that you're thinking about it. There's this thing called quench. It's the area between the top of the piston and the bottom of the cylinder head. And ideally we want that flat. So you have a flat head and you have a flat part of the piston. And perfect range is around 38 to 42 thousandths. 40 is a good round number. I've known stock eliminators races to run them a lot tighter than that. But the bigger the bore, the more your piston starts to rock, and you might have a chance of actually hitting the cylinder head. So you don't need a 4-valve relief piston since you're only using 2 of them. Okay? Plus, what's that doing is each one of those valve reliefs are 3 to 5 cc's of an opening. So you take 2 of them, and you got 6 or 7 cc's, maybe more. And And now you don't have a nice flat surface. So if you're going to get your pistons, you say, okay, now I'm going to get a 2-valve relief piston with a flat surface on it so I can set my quench, okay? And how you set your quench is when you bring your stuff to the machine shop, you can't do this yourself. Your machine shop will have to mock up your engine, and they'll measure how far the piston is down in the hole, whether it's 10 thousandths or I've seen on a big block Mopar 55 thousandths down in the hole. Now imagine 55 thousandths down in the hole with a 41 thousandths head gasket. You got 100 thousandths between that. There's no quench there. That's lost power and a loss of compression. They'll mock it up and take anywhere, we'll use a small block for this example, 20, 25 thousandths, maybe 26, 27 thousandths. And you're going, well, that's a lot to take off a deck of a block. No, it's not. It's not shit. Okay? I've taken 50, 60, 70 thousandths off blocks. Okay? The thing that you might run into is when you're fitting your motor together is the way your manifold fits to your cylinder heads. Again, that's in a later part. Okay? And to cure that, you take the manifold with it if you have to cut a lot off the heads or a lot off the block, and they'll match the manifold. And it's usually cheap, like to cut the manifold, it's like 40 bucks or 30 bucks. So it's not a big deal. So now you got your 2-valve relief piston, you had it mocked up, and you've got 0 deck height or 1,000th in the hole. So your piston at top dead center is completely flush with your block, okay? Now you take your 40 thousandths gasket and your flat cylinder head. Now you've got the perfect quench. And what happens is when that piston comes up and it gets in that 40 thousandth quench, it shoots and pushes the combustion, the fuel, the air, the fire, and everything into a tight spot into your combustion chamber, and it makes more power. Not only does it make more power, but believe it or not, it's less prone to detonate. You would think that, you got a tight quench that it's going to detonate more. No, it's the exact opposite. It's making it so efficient, it actually takes away detonation. So it's a double win. The next thing is your ring pack, okay? And you'll see on high-end motors like an 043 top ring. Well, they'll use an 043 top ring usually on boosted applications or big motors that might have some nitrous and so on and so forth. And they won't have a moly coating. They'll have another special coating on the ring. And we don't really need to worry about that. And this is over what we're talking about. We're talking about building, a general motor that can run, 9s, 10s, 11s, 12s. We're not building a 1200 horsepower 632. I want you to use thin rings. I want you to use 16th, 3/16 rings. Okay? Now, if it's going to be a street car, I want you to get standard tension oil rings because they work better, they last longer, and so on and so forth. If it's a race car and you're just going to be going to the track, okay, if this engine is sealed up properly and built properly, I want you to use a low tension oil ring, okay? A high tension oil ring or a regular tension oil ring is about 25 to 27 pounds, okay? A low tension average is about 14 pounds, okay? And there used to be this old thing years ago that they would put the piston and the oil ring into the cylinder, and they would use a fish scale and they'd pull it up and they would measure and see how much drag it was. It works. There's other ways to do it. The way that I learned was to put it together and put all the pistons in it with all the oil rings in it and use a turning torque wrench to see what your turning torque of your motor is. Now I want you to think about this. If your turning torque, I'm just making up a number, is 15 foot-pounds with all 8 pistons in it, okay? And you build a tight motor with big rings and standard oil rings, and you've got 40 or 50 foot-pounds of turn and torque, which motor is going to go faster? It can have the same head, same cam, it can be in the same car. I don't care. Okay? The more efficient the motor is, the faster the car is going to go. Okay? We don't care that the motor is going to go 100,000 miles. This motor is not going to go 100,000 miles. Hell, it's not going to go 50,000 miles. Okay? I want your piston to wall to be 1,000th or 2,000ths over what the recommend is. Okay? So you get your pistons and you look at them and they're forged pistons and they say, okay, they want the piston wall, say 4,000. Okay? I want you to set them at 5 or 6. Okay? If you're going to spin this motor up 7,000, I want 6. I want a couple thousands more. Okay? It doesn't need to be that tight. You're not losing anything. All right? So, coatings on the piston. Moly is a popular coating, and plasma moly is actually better than moly. And what's funny is they're the same ring. It's just got a different coating on it. It's still the same kind of shitty cast iron or whatever ring material, and it's sprayed on. And it works good. It seals good, and they're affordable. Gapless rings, I have never used them. And I know people that have brilliant luck with them, okay? It's just something I don't do. There's other things that I do that people don't do. If gapless rings, you know somebody uses it or your engine builder recommends it and he knows it works and you're not using nitrous, and I don't know, maybe you can use nitrous on gapless rings, but like I said, I don't. I'm a little old-fashioned. I like to set my ring gaps, and I always set my ring gaps large too. You would think that you want to set them as tight as possible to make sure you have the least blow-by, and it's true. I mean, if you got a 4-inch bore and you set it to the normal 16 thousandths, theoretically you should have less blow-by than if you set it at 18 or 20. But you know what? I'm going to set mine at the 18 or 20, and I'm going to make my second ring even larger than that. Now I'm going to have a 22 or 24 second ring, okay? Because the second ring not only acts as an oil scraper, but it allows the gas to pass so it doesn't unseat the top ring. And I've been doing that, again, for 25 years. Motor spinning 7,600 RPMs. So, anyways, to look back on this, we want to use the correct piston. If you're building a flat top motor, you want to have your quench right. You want to have the correct ring pack for your application. Okay? If you don't know, you can call a ring company, and believe me, they'll talk to you. They'll talk your ear off. They'll even build you a set of custom rings if you want. Okay? A $40 set of rings, even an $80 set of rings, don't belong here. Okay? Can you get away with a $125 set of rings? Absolutely. Will it work fine? Absolutely. So, that's where we're at now, and we'll see you at the next segment.